Imagine waking up tomorrow to find out that a 2,000-year-old machine can still measure earthquakes better than half the apps on your phone. That is not science fiction, that is ancient China. Because when most of the world was still arguing about which way was north, Chinese engineers were already building shock-absorbing buildings, error-proof weapons, self-driving navigation systems, and timekeeping devices so precise that emperors would panic if they stopped ticking. And here's the wild part. For at least 10 of these technologies, we haven't really improved on the core idea. We've just added electricity, plastic, and a touch screen on top of systems that were already close to perfect. So in this video, we are going to unlock 10 ancient Chinese technologies so brilliant that modern engineering basically said, yeah, we'll just keep using that. Stay with me till the end, because the last one is quietly running your bank account, your government, and your entire global economy, whether you realize it or not. Let's start with the machine that could feel an earthquake before anyone else knew it was coming. Thousands of years before seismology labs, a man named Zhang Heng built a bronze dragon jar that could sense earthquakes happening hundreds of kilometers away. No batteries, no wires, just physics. On the outside of this big metal vessel, 8 dragon heads held metal balls in their mouths. Below them, 8 toads sat with their mouths open. When an earthquake somewhere in the region shook the ground, one ball would drop, plink, into a toad's mouth, pointing in the exact direction of the quake. Think about that. Modern seismographs are full of sensors, data streams, and calibration protocols. Yet the core concept is still the same. You suspend a mass, you detect relative motion, you turn that motion into a readable signal. Zhang Heng had already nailed that logic in 132 CE. The only real upgrade we've done is to hook his idea up to computers and the internet. The elegant, mechanical brain of the system? Still unbeatable, and it wasn't a gimmick. Records say officials could tell there had been a distant quake even when their own city felt nothing, because the ball had dropped in the right dragon's toad. Today we use multi-billion-dollar sensor networks to do the same thing. Yet engineers still stare at replicas of Zhang Heng's device, trying to figure out exactly how that internal mechanism transferred tiny vibrations into such a clean directional signal. When someone builds a machine 1,900 years ago, and you're still reverse engineering it, that's when you know it's not primitive, it's just efficient. Now imagine trying to find your way across mountains or battlefields without GPS, maps, or even a stable compass. Ancient China solved that too, with a vehicle that always pointed south, no magnets required. The south-pointing chariot sounds like a myth. A wooden cart, no electronics, and yet the little figure on top always points in the same direction as you turn and twist through the landscape. But the secret wasn't magic, it was math, locked into gears. Inside the chariot sat an early form of differential gear, the same fundamental mechanism that powers the axles of your car today. Here's the genius. As the wheels turned left or right, the gear train rotated the figure in the opposite direction to cancel out the turn, so its arm remained fixed relative to the Earth. No magnets, no stars, no satellites, just pure mechanical logic. The modern world didn't upgrade that idea. It just copied it and plugged it into engines and drive shafts. Differential gears in cars, trucks, and even some robots still rely on the same geometry used in those chariots. If someone from the Han Dynasty stepped into a modern automotive factory and looked at a differential assembly, they might not know what steel or oil was, but they would understand exactly what that gear cluster was doing, because it's their system just on steroids. But let's leave the road and move to the sea, because without another Chinese invention, modern cargo ships would literally snap in half. Chinese shipbuilders were the first to use watertight bulkheads, internal walls inside a ship's hull that divide it into separate compartments. If one compartment floods, the others stay sealed, and the ship survives. Simple? Yes. Replaceable? Not really. Modern supertankers, container ships, and even warships still use this exact concept, with steel instead of timber, welding instead of wooden joinery, but the same compartmentalized design. Back in the first millennium, Chinese sailors were already piloting large ocean-going junks with these internal partitions. That design made their ships more stable, safer in storms, and much harder to sink. European navies eventually copied it centuries later when they realized, oh, if you don't want your ship to die from one unlucky hit, maybe you shouldn't build it like a hollow log. Today, international maritime regulations literally require bulkheads, subdivision, and compartment design in big ships. We've run computer simulations, stress-tested hulls, and put vessels in wave tanks. The conclusion? The ancient Chinese solution is still the backbone of modern naval safety. You can change the materials, but you don't upgrade the logic of carving a big floating box into smaller sealed boxes. Now, here's a trick question. What's the simplest, strongest building system you can use to assemble wooden skyscrapers without a single nail? Chinese architects answered that with a structural Lego system called dugong, interlocking wooden brackets that look decorative but are actually doing insane amounts of work. Stack a column, add a stack of semi-cantilevered blocks, lock them together, repeat. These brackets transfer weight from heavy roofs into the columns, distribute stress, and even flex during earthquakes like giant wooden shock absorbers. We still haven't really out-engineered that. Modern seismic architecture uses steel frames, dampers, and sliding bases, but the underlying philosophy, distribute force, let the building move, don't fight the earthquake head-on, is exactly what dugong was doing to palace roofs centuries ago. Some of these wooden temples have survived major quakes that wiped out newer concrete buildings around them. And here's the twist. We keep coming back to these ideas. Engineers study ancient dugong joints to design modular buildings and dry construction systems that can be assembled and disassembled without glue or screws. In a world trying to use less material and build more sustainably, the backward method is starting to look very forward. Speaking of forward, let's talk about time. Because for a long stretch of history, the most advanced clock on Earth wasn't in Europe. It was an astronomical skyscraper of gears in China. In the 11th century, engineer Su Song built a massive clock tower driven by water with a chain drive mechanism and an escapement system that regulated the flow of time. This wasn't just a glorified water drip. It powered rotating celestial globes, rang bells, and moved mechanical figurines to mark the hours. The heart of it was an early escapement, the same principle that later defined mechanical clocks worldwide, letting a gear advance in controlled equal steps. Modern watches are miniaturized, and we've added quartz and atomic timekeeping, but the core mechanical idea of an escapement controlling motion? Still there. Su Song's tower showed that you could translate a constant flow, water, into precise, discrete ticks of time with a clever mechanical gate. That concept is so efficient that even after electronics took over, mechanical watch lovers still obsess over escapement design, not because it's outdated, but because it works. And if you think keeping time was impressive, wait until you see what they did with money. Long before online banking, the Chinese Empire hit a problem. Too much cash. Literally. Copper coins were heavy, hard to transport, easy to steal. The solution they came up with is something you probably have in your pocket right now, just in a more colorful form. Paper money. By the Tang and Song dynasties, merchants were using flying cash and government-issued notes, pieces of paper that represented value instead of having value themselves. This was a radical shift from coins and metal. It required trust in an abstract system, exactly what modern fiat currency is. Today, our banknotes, checks, and even digital balances are still built on this idea. The symbol matters more than the material. You might say, but we have digital money now. That's an upgrade. Is it though? Strip away the app interface and the encrypted databases, and you're still relying on a centralized authority and a shared belief that a number in a system equals value. Ancient China had already prototyped that mental and economic technology. The hardware changed, the operating system stayed the same. Now let's go from money to matter, specifically porcelain. If you've ever used a ceramic mug, a bathroom sink, or a tile floor, you're living in the world that Chinese porcelain built. Porcelain was more than pretty pottery. It was a carefully engineered composite material, kaolin clay, fired at insanely high temperatures to produce a body that was thin, hard, white, and slightly translucent. European alchemists spent centuries trying to copy it. Whole industries grew around China, and the name stuck because nobody could beat the original formula for strength and beauty. Modern ceramics are more specialized, tiles, engine parts, insulators, but the basic recipe of using controlled firing, refined clay, and mineral additives is straight from ancient kilns. What's even more striking is that the balance between form and function has barely improved. A Tang or Song Dynasty porcelain bowl is light, durable, and chemically stable. It doesn't corrode like metal, doesn't rot like wood, and doesn't deform like some plastics. We can make ceramics for rocket engines now, but for daily life, the ancient solution is already overkill. You don't fix what isn't broken. All right, time for something a bit more explosive: rockets. Rockets scream modern technology, but the blueprint came from Chinese engineers experimenting with gunpowder and tubes centuries ago. At first, they were fire arrows, essentially arrows with small rocket engines attached. Then they evolved into more complex rockets and rocket barrages described in military manuals. Now compare that to modern rocketry. Yes, we have guidance systems, turbo pumps, and cryogenic fuels, but the basic physics is still the same. You expel mass at high speed in one direction to move in the opposite direction. Ancient China had already nailed that mental model long before anyone wrote down the equations to describe it. Even the idea of building more advanced multi-component rockets appears in those early designs. We've improved materials, fuels, and control systems, but the raw concept hasn't been replaced, just refined. Rockets aren't new. They're a centuries-old technology wearing a SpaceX hoodie. Let's rewind from rockets to something deceptively humble: the wheelbarrow. Not exciting, right? Until you realize the Chinese version fundamentally redefined how humans move weight. Instead of putting the wheel at the front like many later European models, Chinese engineers often placed the wheel at the center of the load. That single change meant the wheel, not the person, carried most of the weight. One worker could move what would normally take several people. Try to improve that design today, and you end up with the same idea. Modern wheelbarrows, dollies, hand trucks, and even some hospital equipment are all variations on shifting the center of mass over a wheel to reduce human strain. We've changed materials, added pneumatic tires, maybe thrown in a brake, but the physics is identical. It's an ancient exoskeleton for your back. Now we land at the final quiet giant, the magnetic compass. Because if you want to navigate the entire planet, you eventually have to answer one question: which way is north? The compass as a navigational tool matured in China. Early versions used lodestone, naturally magnetized iron ore, shaped into needles or spoons that align with Earth's magnetic field. Drop the needle on water or float it on a piece of wood, and suddenly you had a portable, reliable direction finder that worked in fog, at night, or on a featureless ocean. Modern aircraft and ships use gyros, satellites, and inertial systems. Phones use chip-scale magnetometers. But underneath all of that, the fundamental reference is still Earth's magnetic field. We calibrate, correct, and augment it, but we haven't replaced it. GPS can go down, maps can be wrong. The planet's magnetic field is just there. The ancient Chinese found it, harnessed it, and built a tool so solid that every navigation technology since has had to acknowledge it. Think about that lineup for a second. A mechanical earthquake detector that doesn't need power, a vehicle that always knows its direction without magnets, ships that survive flooding because their insides are compartmentalized, wooden buildings that flex during quakes instead of shattering, a clock tower that turns flowing water into ticking time, paper money that runs the modern economy, porcelain so advanced Europe treated it like alien tech, rockets that set the pattern for space travel, wheelbarrows that hack human strength, and a compass that still underpins global navigation. These aren't just old inventions. They're proofs of concept that solve problems so cleanly that the future had nothing left to do but scale them up. Add metal, add electricity, add code. But the core logic, the real technology, was already there. And maybe that's the biggest lesson hiding inside these ancient machines. The most powerful technologies are not always the newest ones, just the ones that align perfectly with how the universe already works. Ancient Chinese engineers weren't guessing in the dark. They were running long, slow experiments with wood, metal, water, clay, and human muscle. When something survived centuries of war, weather, and empire, it proved itself better than any marketing slogan ever could. So the next time someone says ancient world like it means backward, remember Zhang Heng's seismoscope, quietly catching distant quakes, or a south-pointing chariot calculating direction without a single line of code. Remember that our global economy is still running on the operating system of paper money, and that we still cross oceans in ships divided by bulkheads, guided by a compass, born in a world with no satellites. If you want more deep dives into the hidden tech that still runs our modern world, hit subscribe, drop a comment with which invention blew your mind the most, and share this video with someone who thinks the past was primitive. Because as you've just seen, sometimes the most advanced technology is the one that never needed an update.